I'm trying to like put this in like the most politic terms or the most products intended for public usage or consumer usage.
Hello and welcome to episode 15 of React Native Radio. Today on our show we have Peter Pikarczyk.
Hey everyone.
Lee Johnson.
How's it going?
And Kevin Old.
Hey everyone.
This show is the first in a series of two shows where we're going to be speaking with the team at Microsoft, the team that is building tooling for mobile development in JavaScript. So specifically, we're going to be kind of speaking more around React Native and Cordova. So today we're going to be actually speaking about Cordova in particular. And the next show, we're going to be probably going more in depth about React and React Native after the React.js comp. Today, we're also going to be kind of picking their brain about projects they're working on and getting their feedback and advice on when to choose either Cordova or React Native for your project. So our special guests today are Ryan Salva.
Hey there, how's it going?
Subhack Oak.
Hey, hello guys.
And Parachute.
Hey folks, how are you doing?
Hey, welcome to the show, guys. So before we get started on our topic, can you guys kind of go through one after another and kind of give us a quick overview of what you work on at Microsoft?
Sure, yeah. I'll maybe start this one. So our team is responsible for really making JavaScript developers more successful building mobile apps. And that covers a wide variety of different technologies. Today, a lot of what we do is around JavaScript tooling for Cordova, and we're just kind of starting to dip our toes into the React Native space as well. On the Cordova side of things, we've got a number of different tools that we've put out there over the course of the last year. They're inclusive of actually like inside of the Visual Studio IDE, we unveiled Cordova tools for Apache Cordova, affectionately named TACO, kind of an acronym, I don't know, about a year ago. And we've enjoyed tremendous success, particularly for kind of enterprise type of plays in that IDE based tool. But then we've also got tooling that comes out into kind of your normal kind of slimmed down text-based editor like Sublime or Text Wrangler or Vim or VS Code. And so we've got a command line that we released a couple of months ago, command line tool. It's essentially a utility to complement Cordova development, which can be seen and you can kind of learn all about it at taco.tools. I just found out a few months ago that .tools is a new domain extension. Who knew? And then we've also, I know, right? Kind of cool. And now that the kind of domain extension kind of bonanza's out, you can get all sorts of different crazy 3 and 4 and 5 letter extensions. And then we've also will be unveiling very soon here some extra special tools that go into VS Code. Many of your listeners may already know that VS Code supports debugging Node applications. And we're going to be taking a similar tact with Cordova applications as well. You'll be able to debug from directly within your text editor, launch the debugger to an emulator or a browser or to a tethered device, and be able to set breakpoints right there in VS Code, debug it, get IntelliSense, kind of, all the normal kind of fun stuff that you'd expect out of a good kind of editing environment, plus taking it a little bit into the debugging side of things. So that's kind of where we're at today in the Cordova space. The broader team, though, takes responsibility for a lot of other stuff that kind of extends outside of the basic Cordova stuff and is more about JavaScript development at large. So our team is responsible for the TypeScript language itself. Our team is responsible for the browser developer tools that you find in Edge today. And then we've also got a bunch of cool extensions that you can find in things like Sublime, providing better IntelliSense for TypeScript within Sublime, providing even like kind of connections to Chrome debug tools outside of VS Code itself. We've got a lot of, in the last half year or so, we've started to kind of create an environment where the team is encouraged to create a lot of small experiments to just kind of plant a million roses and see what blooms. And today, the work that we're doing inside of Cordova and inside of React Native, and even some of the stuff that we're doing with TypeScript are kind of the fruits of those labors.
Very cool.
Awesome. Yeah, that sounds like a really cool thing to be working on, actually.
It's like it's great to be at a company that is, I mean, it's like being at a really well-funded startup right now. There is like, there's money to kind of go out and try cool, crazy things. And we've got a team that's big enough where we can break it out into small teams of 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 developers and product managers and just kind of go out and see what we can do to make JavaScript developers more successful, period. The sky's the limit.
So I know you guys have been doing a lot of open source stuff lately, and a lot of people are, loving, all the stuff that you guys are doing. How long have you been working with the company, and how has the environment, I guess, changed over the course of you working there?
I can answer for myself personally, but I'd love to hear Soak and Parachute as well. So Soak, you've been there for how long now?
Yeah, that's actually a good segue into my introduction, which I was waiting. Basically, I've been with Microsoft, believe it or not, for at least 11 and a half years now. So a decade of development. I was a developer at Microsoft for 10 years of it, and starting from .NET. In fact, I joined Microsoft when there was the .NET platform being released in 2001, 2002, and then working on Windows Forms for client side. I've always been on the client side of things, moving on to WPF, Silverlight, and then into hybrid model. And coming back to the question being asked, we always had a 3 years or more, actually, kind of a development cycle, right? Like Visual Studio and other platforms, right? And now the entire shift has gone to more open source, agile, making sure that we are developing and delivering fast, failing fast kind of a model. And with this kind of a model, I think that's what actually excited me. And then I started working for Ryan as a program manager. And when I joined this team, I was mostly owning some features within Visual Studio, like the first build and launch and getting Cordova hooked up underneath the Visual Studio framework. And then I've been started owning some of the development workflow, the command line workflow that Ryan talked about, especially around Taco CLI and how you do get your development setup fast, especially around installing the build time dependencies. And now we are starting looking at VS Code. So that has been the journey from kind of a little bit, should I say, waterfall model, where you build, and then test, and then actually release, to more of a hybrid agile model where you're all constantly testing first, then building, and then testing again. So it's been quite an interesting journey for me, actually, for the last 11 years.
I think, so just kind of building that, a lot of this has changed, particularly since Satya came on board as CEO. If you look at the last, what did Satya came on about a year and a half ago? Is that right?
Yep.
It is like the culture at Microsoft, it is night and day between kind of what it was under the Ballmer administration, if you will, and the Satya administration. The focus is much more on experimentation, much more on building in the open and being accepting of failure when you build a product and it doesn't, if it doesn't get developer use, okay, that's cool. Set it to the side, try something new. And so there's a lot more experimentation happening and a lot more willingness to let individuals try kind of small projects that they think are cool and just see what it grows up into. That's not to say that Microsoft still doesn't have grand ambitions and, a big agenda and a lot of dreams about where Microsoft as a company, which has, tremendous resources that span many technical areas, everything from developer tools to Office to HoloLens. But within each one of those kind of fiefdoms, if you will, there's a lot more innovation coming out at the ground level. And I think that there's a lot less top-down management that I saw 2, 3, 4 years ago.
Yeah. So the world's biggest startup.
The world's biggest startup. You got it.
So if you guys have like something cool that you guys want to work on or something in your head, do you kind of just bring it up to your peers and you talk about it? And like, how does a new product or a new project come into being, I guess?
That's actually an interesting question. And I guess I haven't introduced myself. Hey, folks, my name is Parshuram, and I'm probably the newest member in the team here.
with Ryan and Sok. I've been here for less than 1 month or 1 year in Microsoft typically. Before this, I was working for this open source subsidiary of Microsoft called Microsoft Open Technologies, and I used to do a whole bunch of open source stuff. In fact, the team that I was working with was involved in the W3C standards and things like that. I'm also an Apache Cordova committer. And getting back to your original questions, I think the whole idea of experimentation is pretty much the fact that ideas don't come from top down all the time. You can have grassroots innovation. I think that's an interesting way to look at it. So to give you a real example, what I basically did was one fine day I was just playing around with React Native. I figured that so the React Native guys did this really cool trick where you can use Chrome for debugging React Native, right? And what I did is I picked up their idea and worked out a way in which I could do the same debugging on VS Code. And then I hooked up an experiment together, put out a web page out there, asking how many people really want to participate and how many people would be interested in this. And depending on the signups, we would decide whether we wanted to build it or not. So I think that's the typical kind of experimentation that you're seeing in specifically in our team, because we are making these, as Ryan said, plant 1 million roses, see how many of them bloom. That's pretty much what I did for the React Native VS Code story also. I put up a video, put up a sign-up page, just wanted to figure out how many people are interested. And to my surprise, a lot of people were really interested in the whole story where you could use VS Code for debugging React Native. So that was something that showed promise. And as a result, the teams decided that, hey, let's go build it. And I think that's one typical example of how we started building some of these things.
Yeah, and we have done the same thing with the VS Code Cordova extension as well. We put out a video for people to subscribe to, and that's the kind of model that we are following. Let's go and ask people, test it out, and build stuff, right?
Yeah, awesome. I've actually seen that Visual Studio React Native prototype. When is that going to be released, or is it released already?
It's not out yet. We are hoping to get something out before ReactConf. ReactConf is a time frame when we should have something out. But I think the hope here is we are probably not going to make the grand announcement of, hey, here's the final product. We are going to learn through the cycle. So I think the idea here is we'll probably open source the product, continue developing, and people who want to play around with it can download it, build it themselves. And then we'll probably have a final build somewhere towards ReactConf.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, and if anyone wants to take a look at it, it's on taco.tools/vscode/rn. That's kind of the basic webpage for you to kind of get a quick overview of the plugin.
And if you guys are going to the website, please do sign up for it. By signing up on the website, you're just letting us know that you are interested in this tool as an idea. And that will give me more ammunition to go talk to my management and get more resources to make that a reality.
Yeah. And since we are also doing Cordova stuff here, I would say that on the same site, taco.tools/vscode, you'll have a subscription for Cordova people. So if you, again, the same story, if you are interested, I would request all of you guys to go there and subscribe so that we can build it for Cordova as well.
I want to underline a theme here that is in kind of Parachut's story and kind of Sok's words as well, which is, you really asked kind of how has development changed at Microsoft and the time that we've been there, and particularly in the last year or two. And I think one of the really big differences here is that all of the new products, particularly that are coming out of our team, but are coming out of Microsoft at large, really what drives the kind of continued investment in those products is developer voices. Every time that developers put a star on GitHub or fork a repo or send out a kind of little bit of Twitter love or whatever, we essentially take those as votes for those features. And every single vote really just increases the amount of resources and time and effort and ultimately money that we kind of invest in those features and in those tools. So whether it's for any of the work that we do on Cordova, or it's on React, or it's on TypeScript, or it's on React Native, if you see something out there that you love and Microsoft is contributing to it, let us know. Because if it's something you love, then we want to give you more of it. And without that kind of dialogue that we get out of the developer community, we're just going to kind of sit back and keep on tossing out new ideas. And so that dialogue and those votes and that participation, that's going to drive our investments. And so please keep an open dialogue with us.
So do you guys have any areas of the company using the tools that you're you're building each day?
Yeah, absolutely.
Can you share any of those?
So none of them that the two biggest ones that I know of are not public yet.
Okay.
But what I can tell you is that they are being used in products destined for consumer usage, and that they. Oh, I'm trying to put this in the most politic terms, or the most the products intended for public usage or consumer usage, and that they would be commonly used in kind of business communications. That's really dodgy answer, I know.
Awesome.
but it's probably
they're used in apps that do stuff.
Yeah, totally. Apps that do stuff.
But it shows that you guys aren't necessarily building tools just for the sake of building tools. You're building tools that you're actively using.
Oh yeah. I mean, we absolutely dog food all of our own materials, and when I say these are being used for things that intended for public consumption, it would be big time public consumption, not just a small line of business app to the side. We absolutely believe in kind of the technologies that we're investing in. Microsoft is no different than any other technology company out there. There are thousands and thousands of developers building for mobile apps using JavaScript, whether that's through a React native path, or that's a Cordova path, or that's something else. And, we've got the exact same needs that other technology companies do. And so it makes sense. It's cost effective for us to just use our own tools. But one thing that I kind of do want to steer clear of here is painting a picture that we just build tools for ourselves. Again, it's a much stronger vote of confidence if Netflix uses our tools, or if Accenture or Ernst & Young or any giant company or small startup comes out there and says, hey man, we're using this and it's making us more successful as a business. It's making us more successful as a developer. That kind of feedback from outside of Microsoft, that trumps just about anything any kind of internal feedback that we get. I think that, speaking from personal experience, there is at least 1 year in there where I feel like most of the projects that I was working on were because we had a customer from within Microsoft. And don't get me wrong, there's lots of reasons to kind of serve our own. Microsoft is a gigantic company, something like 120,000 people. So that's a big market. But it means a lot more to me if I'm making developers' lives better outside of Microsoft and in the larger development community.
And I think I'd also like to add a couple of specific cases where our team made contributions where we wanted to help both internal customers of Microsoft and folks on the outside. So to give you one example, the team that I work with, we are actually committers in the Apache Cordova project, meaning that we write open source code, we commit code, and we help with releases and help with a bunch of different things in the Apache Cordova project. The reason we do that is because we want to ensure that Apache Cordova works awesome. It actually is useful for building large-scale performant mobile applications. And that need is one. So some of the internal teams in Microsoft, as Ryan was saying, are building these massive applications for consumer use, and we need to ensure that both Cordova and React Native as platforms hold up to the promise of performance, hold up to the promise of ease of use and stuff like that. So as a result, not only are we investing heavily in tools, our team also has been investing in a platform itself. So as I said, we have almost 8 people who are committers in the Apache Cordova project. We have already sent in, I think, 2 or 3 pull requests to the React Native project, and we are working to ensure that both the platforms work well, so that our big internal consumers are able to benefit out of it. And as a result, given that all of this is open source, people outside can also benefit. So it's win-win for all of us.
I'm going to switch gears here for a second. Considering the fact that you guys are all kind of working on JavaScript and mobile apps and tooling around that, I'd be very curious as to your opinion on the state of developing mobile apps in JavaScript and where you think it's going to be headed over the next year or so. that being, not only React Native and Cordova, but also Native Script and the Angular story, as well as Appcelerator and some of these other things that are out there.
Yeah, that's a pretty cool story. In fact, I think I just saw Appcelerator got acquired this last week. Anyone else see that news?
I think it was today morning. I saw it on TechCrunch today morning.
Right. Yeah, I saw that as well.
Today morning. Yep.
So let's start here. JavaScript as playing a role for mobile development. If you look at any of the analyst reports, and I don't like to look at analyst reports often, but they are helpful for some things. As a language, it has effectively doubled over the course of the last 2 years. And it is, to the best of my knowledge at least, the only language that has seen that kind of growth, or the only technology that has seen that kind of growth in terms of mobile development, cross-platform mobile development within the last handful of years, 2-3 years. And so from my point of view, like we're not at the end of that growth. We're at the very beginning of that growth. We've been in a place for the last 5 to 7 years where each one of the major platforms has essentially had a stranglehold on the apps that were developed for their ecosystem. If you wanted to go develop for Android, hey buddy, you're going Java or Go. If you want to develop for iOS, you're going to go for Objective-C, and then later on here, more recently, Swift. If you wanted to develop for Windows, you had a few more choices, but effectively it was really a C# story. And JavaScript is one of the few languages that we as a development community have collectively built up 20 years or so of expertise, of skills, of just muscle memory for how to use the language. And that we can now take and apply that to mobile application development and do it in a way that allows us to share business logic. This is a key point. So I kind of want to put an exclamation point on it, that we can share business logic across all 3 platforms and not be in a position where we have to rewrite for iOS and then again for Android and then again for Windows. That puts JavaScript in a position where it has a really strong advantage. And it's not just that it has that kind of cross-platform aspect to it, which is awesome and cool, and clearly I have some enthusiasm about. But it's also that JavaScript is the only language of which I'm aware that you have the ability to update your applications without having to recompile and resubmit to the store. And that's significant. I mean, I know you guys have probably submitted plenty of apps in your time through the store. And okay, Google Play Store, you get through relatively quickly. But the Apple Store, like we're trying to submit an app right now, and it's going to be 2 weeks before they can clear through their backlog to get it live in time for, in our case, we're trying to get it live for an event for Phone Gap Day here at the end of the month. But that it takes that long to get a simple bug fix or an update through the store is, pardon me, but it's absolutely criminal. And so that you can use a technology like JavaScript. And in fact, this last couple of months, we released a service that some of your listeners may be familiar with called Code Push, which is essentially kind of like it's only in beta today, but it's a service that allows you it exposes a JavaScript API. If you've got an update to your React Native app or Cordova app for that matter, you upload a zip file to the server. In this case, it happens to all be hosted on Azure. And when your mobile app makes an API call asking the server, hey, is there an app update available? Server responds yes. It downloads the package. It unzips it and replaces all of your local assets, your JavaScript assets or JSX assets with what it downloaded from the server. Bada bing, bada boom, you've just updated your app without having to go through the whole process of resubmitting to the store again. And those kind of advantages, the kind of the cross-platform nature of JavaScript, the fact that, glory be, we've got 20 years of muscle memory built up and getting good at writing JavaScript, and that you've got the ability to update your applications out of band, not to change the intent of the application, but to submit simple bug fixes and small updates. That kind of thing puts JavaScript in a really strong position to become one of the dominant languages for mobile app development moving forward. And I can only see JavaScript's role growing as a result of that.
Yeah, I agree, and I think I would add to it the ability for backend code, right, with Node. So if you are a small startup and you're trying to get something going, you don't have to hire your backend guy and your iOS guy and your Objective-C guy and your Java guy. I mean, you can really get a few good resources in JavaScript and cover the whole front to back. I mean, and for because we are a fairly young 3-year-old startup, and I've been there from the beginning and grown, and it's a big deal. It's a big deal to be able to hire someone that's good at a technology like JavaScript and be able to use that resource in so many different areas.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And the thing is that, I mean, so I have mad respect for Objective-C developers, for Java developers, for people who are writing mobile apps in, quote unquote native languages. Like, clearly there are a lot of talented engineers out there. But the fact of the matter is that for organizations that are in a position where they need to hire in developers, there are just less talented. I don't mean that they are less talented. There's less of them. There are less engineers out there who are really good at Objective-C, Swift, Go, Java development than there are really good JavaScript developers. Because up until, I don't know, let's call it the last 4 years or so, the kind of the technical economy, the technology economy was driven around browser-based development more than it was mobile app development. And so we had a lot more developers who came of age writing those more web-based technologies. And so once you get out of the urban centers, particularly like the Bay Area or Seattle or Boston or Atlanta or Chicago in the US, and the same thing goes for over in Europe and Asia and South America and Australia. Like, once you get out of the urban centers, there are far fewer Objective-C developers out there. And so if you got an idea for a company and you want to bootstrap it up, you got to look around at what talent is available out there. And being able to find a good JavaScript developer and reappropriate those skills, that kind of language maturity towards mobile application development, from my point of view, that's the more democratic choice. Like, that puts the power of development for mobile devices in the hands of a lot more people. And that's a beautiful thing, man. That's what the web was always about. And that's what now mobile app development can be about. It's about democratizing the flow of ideas and of information. I think it's a good thing. And I'm really proud of our team for kind of contributing to it in what small way we do.
I think you just made a fantastic point about the whole idea of not being able to hire talented iOS and Android engineers in smaller towns. We're located in Ridgeland, Mississippi. So as you can probably guess, there are not, just tons of developers here. The ones that are good, that kind of are from here, a lot of times will get job opportunities in other cities. So I cannot tell you how many people have come to me, looking for iOS or Android developers to either help build an idea that they have or help build their startup that they have here in town. We run a couple of local meetups and, we get a lot of requests for that, and there just aren't any here. But as you said, there are quite a few web developers and we all know JavaScript. So if they can repurpose them and kind of build a quality, build an app of equal quality as like a native developer, that's just an enormous opportunity over the next few years, I think, for just growth and opportunity for companies to actually go somewhere, whereas they might not have gone anywhere.
Yeah. Well, and I think, you're kind of starting to pivot onto kind of one of the more interesting points here, which is it is the big question here. The caveat is, can they develop apps of equal quality to what a native app developer would do? And this is a place where I think that JavaScript has made tremendous strides within the last year in particular, with the advent of JavaScript native solutions like React Native, like Angular plus native script, and even in the Cordova space with companies like Ionic and Monica creating kind of control libraries that emulate the native controls. But while we've made tremendous strides, I think that there's more room for growth there. And that's a place where that's probably the next big challenge of JavaScript and mobile app development is how do we become more skillful, more focused on the user experience for the apps we build. Because my background is as a web developer. I've been a web developer for probably more years than I want to count now. And it's absolutely true that web development, a lot of it's about hacking. A lot of it's about just kind of get the job done, get it out there, and we can iterate on it and change it quickly because you've got kind of the speed of the web and the ability to update code on the server every 2 minutes if you want to. And so that has meant that developers are a little bit, web developers, JavaScript developers tend to be a bit more focused on getting the functionality out there. And maybe sometimes that means shortchanging a little bit of the UX. And kind of consumers and people who are out there with their phones have a higher level of expectations for UX on their phones, justifiably so. And so we as developers really need to take responsibility for delivering those better user experiences. That means placing a greater focus on performance. That means actually sweating the details when it comes to, whether or not it's a border radius 2 pixels or 4 pixels, right? We actually need to own up to the fact that native UX, those native developers aren't just kind of brushing UX aside. No, man, they spend a lot of time sweating the details and making sure that the transitions are just right, that the animations are fluid, that all the gradients look, perfect. And we got to do the exact same thing. There's lots of techniques that you can use, but the most empowering technique is just to plain old be aware that is a business priority from the get-go.
I think it brings an interesting point. I know we're spending a lot of time on this, but you guys are the tooling guys, right? So I actually was an iOS developer, and the tooling, the UI tooling in iOS development is good. I mean, you have a visual tool, and there's really nothing like that now for Cordova or React Native or anything like that. And I think that's one reason why, and there are different UI qualities in a lot of Android versus iOS apps. Part of it's because of the 2-week cycle we talked about. Yeah. and then part of it is because the tooling is just really good. I mean, if you use Interface Builder, it is absolutely 100% focused on the UI. It's a big deal. So from a tooling team, what do you guys see in that area? Because that's something it just really doesn't exist in the JavaScript mobile world, a good UI tooling.
Yeah. Parashar, you want to take this one?
Sure, I will. So that's actually a pretty interesting question, and you're probably asking the right folks because this team used to work on a Microsoft product that was called Blend. This used to be an HTML designer. So the fact that, yes, there are no JavaScript tooling is a bad thing, but I think there are a whole bunch of tools that are cropping up that let you do some sort of UI design. So while I agree that maybe we don't have the fidelity of Xcode and things like that, I think the whole fact that people are building these one-off solutions and maybe we'll eventually get there, I think that's probably good news. I have seen UI designers for React Native. I have seen UI designers that work pretty well, good for Ionic. I mean, it's called Ionic Creator, I guess, and that actually works very well. So there are tools there, but yes, I agree that they're not as comprehensive as the iOS or the Android tooling. And I'm guessing there is a lot of potential for it in the future.
Cool, but nothing you guys can talk about that you're working on?
Yeah, I think, the stuff that we're working on today is really about enabling developers to get that kind of immediate visual feedback more quickly, using the tools that are already at their disposal, like the browser, or even kind of through tethered devices, and kind of using that kind of live reload type of functionality to use the actual device itself as the preview surface or as the design surface. But, I will say this, if this is a tool that you and your readers feel like you need, absolutely. I talked earlier about, our investment is driven by developer votes. send a tweet to me. Send a tweet to @RyanJSalva. And that'll build a lot of credibility among the management teams. Say, hey, this is somewhere where we should actually do something.
And given that we are touching about this whole live reload thing, I probably thought I should plug the other experiment that I was working on. So especially given that this is a React Native audience, so I'm sure most of you would have heard of this tool called Browser Sync, which lets you sync gestures across multiple clients or multiple browsers and stuff like that, where if you click on one browser or scroll on one browser, the other browsers on your device do the same action. So something like that already exists for the web. If the listeners of the show think that we need something like that for React Native too, let us know, and that would be something that's interesting to build. I was playing around with it. I was not sure how useful it would be, but if people think that that's something that's useful, please let us know, and we'd see if we can build it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think they're both great ideas. Both the idea of some type of UI creator, that's just something I haven't really thought about, but that I believe that it would probably get some use, especially with kind of people, new developers maybe trying to kind of get into it, or people that are just wanting to prototype quickly and then kind of jump in after that and kind of start doing the coding. So do you guys want to go into some of the more specific things that you guys are excited about that you're working on?
Yeah, so one of the things that I have been working on, as Ryan was mentioning earlier, was this idea of finding out a way in which if I can use Cordova plugins into React Native applications. And the reason why this is interesting is because Apache Cordova has been around for almost 7 or 8 years now. The plugin ecosystem is pretty rich, and React Native is still starting up, and React Native still has a way for you to create native modules, but you probably won't find all the native modules that you need out there. And for many JavaScript developers, finding native modules basically means that at the end of the day, you can start accessing device capabilities, things like camera, or use your native modules to do barcode scanning or geolocation and things like that. So one of the ideas that I've been working around is to figure out a way in which you use a Cordova plugin that scans a barcode, or a Cordova plugin that interacts with the Bluetooth, and use it in React Native. Now, the interesting thing here is Cordova and React Native are not very different, primarily because both of them run some kind of JavaScript. So one of it runs JavaScript in a web view, while the other runs it in a JavaScript engine. Apart from the fact that they use different types of UI, I think at the crux of it, they just are native applications at the end of the day. And they have two parts. The first part being your native code, which lets you access your Bluetooth or your camera. And the second part being JavaScript, which makes this native API look better. So that's how a React native module is. That's exactly how a Cordova plugin is. So I wrote this tool where you can pick up a Cordova plugin, and then the Cordova plugin gets wrapped in as a React Native module, and then you can simply start using the the Cordova plugin inside your React Native application. I've been able to use things like Bluetooth beacons. I've been able to do things like geolocation, barcode scanning, and a whole bunch of stuff with this mechanism. And in fact, RNPM, which is the React Native's package manager, which is starting to get popular. I have a plugin for RNPM which lets you do this. The project is on GitHub. It has an unoriginal name. It's just called React Native Cordova Plugin Adapter. It's like super unoriginal, but I mean, I just wanted to keep it simple, and that's the name of the project. That project has examples and instructions on how to use it, and I think I guess the listeners of the show might be interested in something like that. The other thing I also wanted to specifically ask Ryan is, I think one of the things that we have been talking about is Cordova versus React Native. When should people use Cordova versus when should people use React Native? And I think that'll probably be an interesting conversation to have.
Absolutely.
I was about to ask about using React Native versus Cordova, and like the first argument that came to mind is Cordova Bluetooth beacon, for example, is already packaged up for you and ready for use, whereas you may have to build this in Objective-C or Swift to be able to use it in React Native, right?
That's not necessarily true. The plugin that I wrote that lets you reuse Cordova plugins in React Native, that should be able to act as a bridge that lets you simply pick up the Cordova plugin. So you probably don't have to rewrite it. In fact, what I've started noticing is an interesting trend where a whole bunch of Cordova plugin authors are just picking up their Cordova plugins and just repackaging it so that it works with React Native. And the repackaging basically means add a couple of native files and then add a layer of JavaScript, and that's pretty much it.
Yeah, I'm looking at this React Native Cordova plugin adapter. It looks really, really neat. I'm gonna give it a spin, I think.
Yeah, I think what we're seeing is that there's a lot of fluidity between developers using Cordova and using React Native. Part of it just depends upon their how much they like React or are familiar with React to begin with as a style of JavaScript. But ultimately, these are all JavaScript developers. I think Cordova has been tremendously effective at serving as a kind of a means by which JavaScript developers could build for mobile apps. And it's really only this year that we as JavaScript developers have had a strong alternative for other ways that we can build mobile applications, whether it's React Native or Native Script. And I've even heard rumors about some other JavaScript native implementations maybe coming out in the next year. I think that we're going to see a lot more developers looking for ways that they can leverage native UI, whether that's inside of Cordova or using a straight up native implementation like React Native. Ultimately, like when it comes to making a choice, if you're starting a new project today and you just kind of want to decide, like, there's a fork in the road, which path am I going to take? I think first and foremost, it probably depends upon like how fast do you need to get that guy to market? React Native is still relatively young. I mean, Android support only came out 3 months ago, something like that. And while there's a tremendously enthusiastic community there, as a technology, it's still rather nascent. And I wouldn't call it immature, but it's at the beginning of its lifespan. Cordova's been around for 6 years now. And so there's a relatively mature ecosystem around it. If you've got questions, there's a developer out there who's got an answer, and they've probably got a code snippet that you can snag. In the React Native space, it may require you to do a little bit more troubleshooting and a little bit more of kind of the grunt work of development. That's not a bad thing, but it does reduce your agility by a small amount. And that's one thing to take into consideration. If you are trying to deliver the kind of absolute, indistinguishable from a native experience, React Native is probably a pretty gosh darn good way to go. It is going to require a little bit more elbow grease. It is going to require a little bit more time, but in terms of kind of the end result, you're probably going to you're going to actually get what you pay for. And if you spend more time on it, it's going to look better. It's going to perform better. It's going to smell, taste better. You'll be smarter, brighter, happier, more productive, and lead a better life.
So one other thing is also like write once and run everywhere versus learn once, right? And what Ryan alludes to, and I agree, is that it takes time to learn, but if you have resources to spend to learn stuff, then it will pay you dividends later on, right? So it depends on how soon you want to get stuff out into your customers' hands, and what costs are you willing to pay for that.
I think one thing that really stands out for me is the idea that if you don't necessarily like the style of React, you could do whatever you'd like with Cordova, right? I know you mentioned that earlier on, but I think that's pretty powerful too, because not everyone does love the React style of JavaScript, So being able to choose whatever you'd like to and then import into the project does make that experience a little easier.
And it also makes it, if you're coming from a legacy project, let's say that you've got what has historically been a responsive responsive web application, and you want to enhance that by adding offline support or access to native device capabilities. Cordova is most likely the most natural path because you could have any JavaScript in that whatsoever, and the kind of migration path to a Cordova app is going to be kind of much smoother than it is what will essentially amount to a complete rewrite in most cases when you need to go to React Native. And so I think that having that flexibility to work with a web view, which ultimately, if it works in a browser, it will work in Cordova. That is really useful in a lot of scenarios.
Yeah, that's really awesome.
So I know that you guys mentioned that you are the team that kind of helped create TypeScript or did create TypeScript. How closely do you guys work with the Angular team on Angular 2 and on the native script implementation of Angular?
Yeah. What I'll say is that when Angular came out with, what was it that was immediately before they adopted TypeScript? Was it AScript?
It was called AdScript.
AdScript. Thank you.
Yeah.
AdScript. Yeah. Yeah. So when they came out with AdScript and then immediately, not too long after announcing it, we started our collaboration to kind of merge the two and kind of have TypeScript be the driving language for it. That was a tremendous win for developers and did require a lot of close collaboration between our teams. It's always a heartwarming moment when you see two behemoths of the kind of the software industry who understandably are competitors a lot of the time come together to deliver a better tooling story, better development story for the world. And I'm really thankful that we were able to collaborate with them in the way that we did to make sure that the very small little bit that we needed to add to TypeScript, that we were able to kind of serve all of their needs just by adding a little bit of additional language support and ultimately make Angular development and web development at large kind of better. We've actually since then, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe this last month, CoffeeScript announced that they were doing an end of life on development for CoffeeScript. Does anyone else kind of see that headline? I'm actually going to look it up here right now. CoffeeScript. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that they just this last month decided that they were going to end development on it as a kind of yet another implementation of a way of introducing strong typing and kind of compile the JavaScript. And so I'm happy that we can kind of, as an industry, settle on something not because Microsoft built it, but because it's helpful for the community to have a language that they can trust and that everyone can contribute to. TypeScript, as you guys know, is an open source project. We accept commits from developers all the time. And it's something that, just like so much of so many of the other projects that Microsoft isn't investing in these days, it's something that we want to do in the open so that kind of the development community can influence and kind of tailor it to their needs. Help us make it something that is the language that you want to work with every day.
Yeah, so that's, I guess, something I was curious about. You guys are involved in TypeScript and you're working on all this JavaScript stuff. I mean, how do you not just force everything to be TypeScript because it's, your baby? But I'm a huge fan of it and I understand the point of it, but a lot of the tooling you guys do doesn't necessarily have to have anything to do with TypeScript.
The somewhat short and simple answer to that is because not everyone wants to write in TypeScript, right? And ultimately, we're out there to make tools that make developers happier, that help them get their job done faster. There is a class of project and a class of developer that enjoys working with TypeScript because it makes them more productive. It gives them greater confidence in kind of the quality of the code that they're outputting. And typically that we tend to see that when a project gets over, I don't know, maybe certainly 10,000 lines of code. TypeScript really starts to pay dividends in terms of being able to trust in the reliability of your code and that you're not inadvertently breaking something. So it's certainly a language which starts to really shine on larger projects. And frankly, we also see it shining in a lot of open source projects as well, because in an open source project where you've got commits coming from dozens, if not hundreds of developers, being able to kind of just do a sanity check on check-in and to know that everything compiles nicely, that gives you a little bit greater confidence that the commit that you're accepting, the pull request that you're accepting, that it's not going to kind of hose your entire project. And so for those developers, TypeScript is great, but there's a lot of people that just want to continue working with vanilla JavaScript. I mean, heck, frankly, I'm one of those developers. I'm getting old, man. I learned how to write in JavaScript, and sometimes it just feels like a warm, cozy blanket. And I like working in JavaScript for my smaller, simpler projects. So, every tool has got a place, and you just want to use the right tool for the job. Sometimes that's JavaScript, sometimes that's TypeScript. And for those who are not already using TypeScript today, one kind of little tidbit of knowledge about TypeScript that not everyone knows is that when you are writing TypeScript, that doesn't mean that everything you write in the project has to be TypeScript. You don't have to buy into the language whole hog. It is absolutely kind of acceptable and works with the compiler to intermingle JavaScript with TypeScript. So if you just want one component to be written in TypeScript, or you just kind of want to write out some quick and dirty JavaScript, you can do that. It is not in any way kind of an all or nothing or absolutely prescriptive language. And so for those of your listeners out there who are kind of maybe feeling a little bit cautious about it, but you've got a large project where you think that it might benefit from some kind of typing, don't feel like you've got to commit the next year to converting your code base. You can just bite off a little bit at a time and have TypeScript and JavaScript live in perfect harmony side by side.
Yeah, so I think it's really important to make that point because the past few weeks have been a few posts that have gone around about the fatigue and that whole, exhaustion with JavaScript tooling. We've got a lot of set of tools and they're for different things, and they allow people to implement their ideas in one way or the other. And here we're seeing that something like CoffeeScript is being deprecated, but I think it's really awesome that TypeScript allows you to take advantage of the things that you want to, but then drop back down to JavaScript and use that as the default, right? I think it's very important that if we're going to continually adopt these tools, we can't keep rewriting our code every few years because something else comes out. Yeah. We have to be able to. The tool has to adapt to our new use case.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the JavaScript community has always been one that's been driven by innovation. And to that end, it can sometimes look like a fashion industry. We're always looking for the new framework of the day, the new tool of the day. And I love that because it drives us to improve every day and to try new things and to get better. But at the same time, that kind of churn, that kind of constant determination to kind of try to adopt the newest thing, that can also get in the way of stability and can get in the way of progress, because instead of trying to actually do something new, you're just trying a new technology for the sake of the technology. So the ability to carry a tool forward, to carry a language forward, hopefully that allows us to just to borrow an analogy, to sit on the shoulders of giants, to sit on the code that we've already written and say, you know what, this code does its job. It can stay there, and I can look to the next great thing for innovation, and I can try and accomplish, whatever the next feature is that I want to deliver. That I can write with a new tool or a new framework, but I still need to be able to rest on the shoulders of this large code base that sits under me, which it's got to be supported for an indefinite period of time. And If we just constantly are deprecating the frameworks, the languages that kind of are a year old, then as an industry, we're just going to constantly be solving the small problems rather than the big problems.
Yeah, absolutely. As far as the TypeScript conversation goes, I always thought it was really interesting that you can pretty much open a TypeScript file and write nothing but JavaScript and it's still going to work. So if you ever want to go back and get into some TypeScript, it's kind of there waiting on you.
Totally. Cool. I'm glad you gave it a try.
Yeah, and I think a good use case too is, and you kind of touched on the code sharing, and the way we use it is the kind of the business layer is a different, separate, standalone JavaScript project, but it's written in TypeScript. So it's the most important piece because it handles all the sensitive data and decisions, and it is written in TypeScript so that it can be compiled and typed, and you get that little extra security. But it's a really good way to introduce TypeScript to a project because it's a standalone package that is installed via NPM. So it's a small piece of a bigger project.
Yeah, totally. No, that's perfect. That's the ideal use case. I love it.
So if you're having JavaScript fatigue and you want to pick up something new, just go with TypeScript for now because you don't have to learn anything new other than just renaming and compiling your file, huh?
Something kind of like that, yeah.
And we mentioned it on previous episode, but it does support JSX now too.
It does. That's absolutely true. Yeah, and we've got for those people that have already made the jump into TypeScript, there is a Sublime editor plugin for providing better IntelliSense, and there is also a VS Code. VS Code just kind of natively supports it through d.ts files. So definitely give those guys a try out. And if there's another editor out there that you love that is not supporting d.ts files, for what it's worth, those who don't know, d.ts files are kind of the metadata that provides better IntelliSense when you're in the code editor for any TypeScript file. So if you've got an editor that you're using that doesn't support d.ts files today, again, let us know. We're out there to make TypeScript as a language successful in as many development environments as possible. And so if there's one that's got kind of critical mass and there's a lot of developers using it, you'll be darn sure that the more votes we get, that means that we will go out there and invest in improving support for it.
Awesome. Is there anything that you guys want to go over that we haven't really covered so far?
Not that I can think of. Sok, anything you want to talk about?
No, I think we've covered it all. Just to mention, like all our Taco CLI and the tooling that we are doing, even for the VS Code extension for Cordova, and I think even for the React Native is all built in TypeScript. Given that we were on that topic, so we are also embracing what is good in TypeScript and seeing whether we can actually leverage some of this functionality in our tool set.
And Ryan, I think given that we've been asking people to talk to us, it probably makes sense for us to drop in our contact. So. Maybe we should tell them where should they send us emails or where should they tweet to us.
Yeah, sure. So if anyone wants to contact me or the rest of the team, you can reach me personally on Twitter at Ryan J. Salva or via email rsalva@microsoft.com. I would love to hear from anyone who liked or hated what we said here or has ideas for ways that we can improve the tooling.
I'll go next. If you want to get back to us for Visual Studio tooling or tooling for Apache Cordova, you can contact me on my Twitter handle, Subhag P.O. That is my first name, Subhag, P as in Paul and O. And my email address at Microsoft is pretty simple and easy to remember. It's soak, as in SOAK, at Microsoft.com.
And I think if you use the hashtag VSTaco, that's VSTaco, I think all of us monitor that tag and you should be able to reach us on Twitter too that way.
Okay, great. Okay, so I think we're going to go ahead and get into our picks. Lee, would you like to go ahead first?
Yeah, I after the UI discussion, I'm changing my pick now to after the UI discussion we had and that Ryan brought up to Pix8. Pix8 has a pretty interesting story if you're not familiar with it. I know when I was doing native development, they had a tool called Freestyle where you could style native applications using CSS type styling. and share it from Android and iOS. And then they created this really cool UI prototyping product, and then Google bought them. So it's a pretty cool story. It's called Pixate. And you can create your prototypes, and then your team can view them instantly through the Pixate app.
Okay. Peter, would you like to go ahead with your pick?
Yeah, sure. So my pick for the week is React Native Material Design. If you haven't checked this out yet, it's pretty cool. Someone went through the process of coming up with basically everything you need to build an app with Google's Material Design in React Native. You can check that out at GitHub. It's just React Native Material Design.
Kevin, would you like to go?
Yeah, I have two. One is a post on, it's called 10 Things We Learned While Building a React Native App. And these are extremely relevant. The number one is that you must bundle your app before submitting to the App Store. That kind of blew me away. I just assumed that everyone would know that you still have to bundle your app. But anyway, there's 9 others that are just some things you need to be aware of if these pieces are in your app. And the second pick is a React Native plugin or package that's on NPM, and it's I don't know that it's necessary, but it's very interesting that React Native will allow you to do it. It's called React Native Ken Burns View. So this implements the Ken Burns image effect that has been popular for the past 20 years or so. I don't know why. Like, I really don't know why you would want that, but you can totally do it. So, yeah, maybe we'll see it in an Easter egg in some app. So those are my picks.
Okay, cool. Subhag, do you have any picks?
I don't know whether it accounts for a pick or not, but I have a personal story to share that happened over the weekend, and it goes back to our talk about. Well, you decide what it links to. I'll kind of try to tell the story in about a couple of sentences. I have twins, and I started assembling a money bank for them, and it took me about 2 hours to assemble the money bank. And then my kids actually started putting the plastic money into the bank. And all the money went into the piggy bank stomach. And me, my friends, and whoever assembled it, we were like, okay, how do you get the money out of the stomach so that my twins continue to play with it? And there was no tool. There was nothing in the documentation. And believe it or not, me and my friends struggled it for about a couple of hours trying to get that money out of the bank. And my kids were kind of all helter-skelter, running, crying, and they wanted to play with the toy. Eventually, I think one of us did the right thing of actually getting that piggy bank or the money bank back into the hands of my kids. And voila, they figured it out. The piggy bank had 2 flaps, the wings, and when you press the wings on from both the sides, the bank opened. So the long story short, get your tools to the customers, and they will test it out for you and give you the right solution for your problems.
Very, very nice.
I think that's
awesome.
I think that was my pick of the day. Actually, I was thinking about what I should say on this podcast, and I was like, this is a story that I need to share.
Awesome. That's
Anyways,
very cool.
That's my...
Extremely relevant.
Cool. Okay, cool. Now, Parachute, do you have any picks for us?
Yep, maybe I could share one of the things that I'm working on, which is pretty relevant to React and React Native. So one of the things I did do was I wrote a custom renderer for React Native, for React.js, which renders your React application in a web worker instead of the main UI thread. And what I discovered is that the performance is much, much better than the regular React DOM. In fact, this actually makes React.js much closer to React Native, because React Native runs your main UI thread in a separate thread and your DOM diffing in a separate JavaScript engine, right? Similarly, React Web Worker runs your virtual DOM reconciliation in a different thread, and your UI is in a different thread. So I was playing around with this. The project is called React-Worker-DOM. It's available on GitHub. It's a custom React.js renderer which makes your React applications fast. And I thought I would share this because it's very close to what React Native already does.
Awesome. Yeah, we'll definitely take a look at that.
That's really cool.
Ryan, do you have any picks?
Yeah, absolutely. So since we were talking about this earlier, I figured that folks might be interested to check out Code Push. This is the service that we pushed out a couple of months ago that enables React Native developers to update their apps without resubmitting to the store. It's at microsoft.github.io whack Code Push. And you guys can sign up there for the beta. It is completely kind of free as a beta, and one that I'm personally really excited about. We've actually are using it for one of our event apps coming up this month, and it's been super fun to work with. So highly recommend that one.
Okay, cool. Well, I have a couple of picks. The first is if you like to read books like I do, and you don't have a lot of time, and I'm sure you've heard of the whole audiobook thing. I'm a big fan of Audible, and lately I've been getting into this this group of lectures, I guess you would say, by the Great Courses. And the Great Courses are also available in print, but it's basically talks by either college professors or someone that's very smart in whatever topic it may be. And you can listen to things about ancient history or design or just psychology or whatever. And it's a really entertaining thing if you're kind of bored of reading or listening to books and you want to kind of, learn something different. So the Great Courses is my first pick. And then the second pick is a Pluralsight course that came out by Sam Rabuna, building data-driven React applications with Relay, GraphQL, and Flux. It's very up-to-date stuff, and it's pretty cool if you're trying to, see what the big deal is about Relay, GraphQL, and all that stuff, and I would recommend checking that out. Okay, cool. Well, I think we're going to wrap it up. Guys, I really appreciate you taking time out of your day and joining us. It's been a fantastic episode, I think.
Dude, this has been super awesome. Thanks for having us on, and I'm excited about part 2 when that comes out around ReactConf.
Yeah, we're looking forward to seeing everything that comes out of ReactConf in our next discussion with you. So that's going to wrap up episode 15 of React Native Radio. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you all next week.